Hey guys, how's it going? This is Mike from M&R Automotive. Today we have a 2023 and up Ford Super Duty, and we're installing the M&R hood mount kit. Next thing we're going to do is just lift this plastic trim piece up. If you need to unclip it, there's clips here to give you a little more range of motion. And I'm going to take out this bolt. That's the same bolt we're going to be reusing with the M&R bracket. Okay, here we go. So now we grab the bracket. It doesn't matter the orientation because they're identical up and down. So now we're going to go ahead and put the bolt and thread it back into the original thread. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to put this back. I'm going to go ahead and mount the antenna after because we're still going to have to lift this up to run the wiring underneath this. So I don't want to be able to install the antenna and take it off multiple times. So let's go ahead and install the pod onto the bracket. Your package is going to come with two lights, and you will need to assemble the cradle onto the M&R pod itself. There is, if you look at the thread, there's a large thread and a small thread. And as far as Allen screws, there is a large Allen screw and a smaller one. So the large one holds the cradle together, and then the smaller one will allow you to adjust the angles up and down. So I'm not going to go ahead and tighten them all the way. I like to do it on the vehicle after I align and angle them. So I'm just going to kind of like finger tighten them. And same thing on this side. Excellent. Let's go ahead and mount these on the vehicle. So now we're going to go ahead and mount the pods onto the M&R mounts. We're going to use a supplied nut and washer. There you go. Alright, so now that we got it threaded, I'm just going to finger tighten it. We're going to align it afterwards when we install the one on the driver's side. Follow me on the other end. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and lift the trim piece up. We're going to feed it through the M&R bracket and reinstall it. As you tighten it, it's going to bring and align the bracket in its correct spot. So if it looks a little down right now just because it's not tightened, when you tighten this bolt, it'll straighten it out. We're not going to clip everything back together because we're still going to run the wiring. Let's go ahead and install the pod on here. We're going to need to put a nut and washer on the bottom. So thread it through. It is a little bit tricky just to get the first thread. There's not a lot of space here, so I'm going to use a wrench just to get the first thread on, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread these in. If you're having a hard time mounting the pod onto the bracket, what you do is loosen it up a little bit so you have a little bit more maneuverability. We can mount the pod and then we can tighten it down on the vehicle with a back bolt there. Lift it up a little bit. We can get at least a couple threads in. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and tighten the bracket. Just to give you another option. We're going to go ahead and run the wiring, and then we'll make final adjustments in terms of the height of the light as well as the position. Keep in mind that the passenger side has an antenna, so we're probably going to want to match the passenger side in terms of how it's positioned on the mount. Because of the orientation of the bracket, it doesn't interfere with the windshield wipers or the hood. Okay, so let's talk about the wiring. With the M&R kit, you do get a wiring harness. It's going to provide two grounds, one for each pod. Power wiring harness to be able to bridge the two lights together, the passenger and the driver's side. And we're going to extend that to connect them directly to the auxiliary switches. Notice in the wiring harness, there's a Y split for the power. This is on the passenger side. It's going to go on the passenger side. One end of the harness is going to go to the driver's side, and the other end is going to get connected to auxiliaries. Let's talk about the wiring of the pods themselves. There's 3 wires coming out of every pod. There is a red wire, which is the positive for the main function of the light, which is white. There is a black wire, which is the ground, and there's an additional color wire that provides the power to the amber DRL. So when we look at the wiring harness comes with a red and white, and these are going to be the 2 powers. So I'd like to go red to red. So we're going to go, notice I'm on the passenger side, and this is the one where it splits off. So red to red and crimp. And we're going to go yellow to white. So white is going to be our power source for the DRL function. Okay. Notice that each side is going to come with its own grounding strap. Cool. So the passenger side is ready. Let's go ahead and find a good grounding spot. So there's a 10mm bolt. We could actually use this one. And that's going to be a good ground for us. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. So I remove the bolt. We're gonna slide it through the M&R eyelid for the ground, and we're gonna reinstall it. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and stretch one of the ends of the wiring harness to the driver's side. So now I'm gonna go ahead and go red to red, just like we did on the passenger side. Yellow to white, and that's gonna be the power for our DRL feature. And we're gonna have the black one, which is the ground. We're gonna connect it to the second grounding strap. On the passenger side, we're gonna use the same bolt. On the driver's side, I apologize. Then we're gonna reinsert it through the eyelid. Okay, so now that all the wiring on the pods is good, we can go ahead and hide the wire underneath the rubber grommet. Clip everything back in. Once the antenna is installed, we can go ahead and tie these down. So when you like the orientation of the pod itself, we can go ahead and tie it down. So I'm going to go ahead and note the orientation of the bolt going through the bracket. It's more on the inward, so that way we can do the same thing on the driver's side. So now that we have them installed, let's get ready for the wiring to connect them to the auxiliary switches. On your passenger side, next to the battery, there's an auxiliary box here. In order to get to the auxiliary wires that are already pre-wired and are already hot, you have to remove this box. There's two clips, and the way to get to them is just by using a flathead. And just pry it up and then wiggle the box out. Okay. On the bottom of it, this is where you have all your auxiliary connections. Let's go ahead and free up these wires. And there's also a little legend of what color wire does what. So for the hood mount setup, we're going to use switch 2 and 3. Switch 2 is violet with an orange stripe, which is this one right here. And then switch number 3 is going to be blue and green. And we're going to go ahead and put a crimp connector on here. Okay, so we're going to use switch number 2, which is violet and orange. And we will bring our wiring harness. That's going to connect to the white feature, which is the red wire. And then we're going to connect the white wire for the DRL, and that's going to be the blue and green. Here's the white, and here's the amber DRL. The pods are completely aligned on the outside of the windshield wipers and do not interfere. Now that everything works properly and all the wiring is set, we can go ahead and clean up all the wiring, put the auxiliary box back in place, and enjoy an off-road adventure. Thank you very much and enjoy the product.